this episode, we're going to set up some basic checkpoints and a respawning system. So let's go back into our game manager script, and then we're going to make a new header. We're going to call it respawning, and then we're going to add a serialized field transform, and we're going to call this spawn point. Okay. And then we're going to make another one. And we're going to call this start spawn. This doesn't actually need to be serializable, but so we can see it. And then on void start, we're going to go if spawn point is null. Let's set it equal to start spawn. Sorry. Now you could set up some sort of code to find the start spawn, and we might do that later. But let's go out of this. Actually, no. First, let's set it up to here, and do we have a reference to our player? We don't. So let's set a reference to our player, and we'll go serialized field, game object, and we're going to call this one player. And then let's set up a null check for our player, so we don't have to manually put our player in on every scene. So if player equals null, player equals find object of type. We're going to find an object with a player controller on it, and then we're going to put dot game object to find a game object with player controller on it. So the player should set itself automatically. And then let's do this. Let's make a script quickly so we can do the same for start spawn. I'm going to create a C# script. We're going to call this start spawn. Script doesn't need to do anything. We're just going to use it to find it. And then we're going to go if start spawn is equal to null, I'm going to find start spawn is equal to find object of type start spawn, and then we're going to go dot game object dot transform. So now what this code does is if we haven't manually set our start spawn, it will find an object that has the start spawn script attached to it and set that to equal to its transform to equal to its transform. If the spawn point hasn't been set up to something, it will set it to be the start spawn for the original. And then if the player is not been put in manually, it's also going to find the player. So we know what all these objects. You could do the same for stuff like this, Text Mesh Pro and stuff, but we did that all manually already. Now in respawn, we're going to say player dot transform dot position is equal to spawn point dot position. So now when we respawn, we're also going to move the health if statement. No, Yeah, let's just leave it for now. Let's just leave that there for now. Alright. Now, we need a way to change our spawn points now. So let's head back over to Unity and we'll create a new C# script and we're going to call this checkpoint. Visual Studio loves to open itself up, but not the new script. Okay, so we don't need, well, we might keep start for now. And in our variables, we're gonna put our game manager. Let's call it GM, and if GM is null, GM equals find object of type game manager. Perfect. So it has a reference to its own game manager. And then we're going to do a void on collision. No, we're going to go on trigger. Enter. I don't like using other, so I usually replace this with col. Then we can go if col dot game object dot tag equals player. Then we're going to set the, let's hold a manual transform as well. Transform. Let's go serialize field. Transform. We can call this point. Actually, let's call this spawn point for lowercase s. And we're going to go gm dot, hold up. This spawn point needs to be public. So we're going to set it so when an object collides with this checkpoint trigger, it's going to set our spawn point to the point that we're storing on our checkpoint, and if we die, then we're going to respawn at that new spawn point. So now let's go set up the rest in Unity. So create an empty, let's call this one start spawn. Okay, and then let's attach start spawn to it. Start spawn is a script that does literally nothing. It is just here. Let's make this plane a little bit bigger for this. Let's go like 10 by 10. Perfect. Then let's also put it back to 0, 0, 0. Okay, perfect. Then let's grab our start spawn and let's move it to 0, 0, 0 as well. And then let's move it up a little bit so that the player doesn't spawn in the ground. Perfect. And we're going to create an empty. We're going to move it to 0, 0, 0. We're going to call it checkpoint. We're going to, under it, we're going to create an empty. We're going to call this spawn point. And then we're going to also under it create a cube. The cube is just so we can see where everything is. To this we want to add a box collider and we're going to set it to is trigger. Okay, now let's on our checkpoint also add our checkpoint script and then give it the spawn point, and then let's turn that into a prefab. So the way we do that is we just grab it from our hierarchy and we drag and drop it down the bottom. But we probably don't want it in our scripts folder, so let's move it up to assets. And then we'll create a new folder and we'll call this folder prefabs. and we'll put it in there. Okay. So now let's grab our checkpoint. Okay, we don't want our checkpoint to be there. Let's move it around. Look at our box collider. So the reason we want this cube is so that the cube is the same size as the standard box collider if you put it on a checkpoint, on an empty object. So if we scale our checkpoint, let's make it like 5 by 5 by 5. We can see very easily where our checkpoint is, and then we simply just turn the cube off when we're done placing it. So let's get these checkpoints, and then let's not edit our collider. Let's place it on this corner here. And then let's press Control D to duplicate it. Let's place the other one here. They're a bit small. Let's grab them both. Let's make it 10 by 10 by 10. And then let's really make them properly on the corner. Just going to put these on all the corners just for when we walk later, so it's nice and easy. We're going to duplicate both, move them to the other side, and then we're going to grab the cube in each of them and just turn them off. Alright. And then now let's clear all of our warnings. Programmers don't care about warnings, only errors. So let's click play and see if we have errors. So let's check on our game manager first. Does it find all of the stuff that we want? It does. So now, if we're looking around, let's walk off a little bit. Feels like a very long walk. And then if we press F a bunch of times, we should just respawn back in the middle. Perfect. Alright, let's... Okay, we're headed to a corner. So now, if we check our game manager, spawn point is spawn point. Oh no, that's right. Okay, I think it did work. So it did work, okay, and now if we click back onto this, if we click F a bunch of times, we should respawn there. See, we're respawning on our checkpoint now instead. Now if we walk over here, and then kill ourselves, we're pulled back to where the checkpoint is. So obviously you wouldn't do it like this, where it's in 4 different corners, but you get the idea of what we're doing here. See you in the next video.